Chapter 1785 Samaran City. Zhang Yi and the others quickly returned to their convoy. Thinking about the ultra-large mechanical life-form energy source that had been placed in dimensional space, Zhang Yi almost laughed out loud himself. It didn't occur to him that this thing had arrived so easily. That's not true. Who would have thought that in Fremon's territory, there would still be an old sixth like Zhang Yi who would step in and silently take away what was right under someone's nose? Now well, Prodaja's side thought that Brahma had tricked them. And Emperor Indra still didn't know that the precious energy core he had worked so hard to get had fallen into Zhang Yi's hands. The two teams, from two different directions, traveled towards Fremon's current temporary capital, Samaran City. Zhang Yi and his team had also deliberately made some detours in order to avoid Brahma's team, thus arriving at a slightly later time. However, at this moment, Zhang Yi was not in a hurry at all. He asked Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin to study this special energy source in Muyan's shadow space. Waiting until its technology was completely deciphered would allow Zhang Yi's team's technology level to rise to an unimaginable level. The other thing was those mechanical life forms, which were equally incredible masterpieces. The mass-produced machines of the mechanical civilization, on the other hand, were things of ingenuity to the human civilization. Mass production meant that the industrial technology was extremely mature. Its workmanship materials were only a little worse than the E-metal that Lu Karen had fused to create. And what Zhang Yi was most interested in was the defensive force field on them. That thing, it was simply a divine skill against the mutants. Zhang Yi had a premonition. If they were unable to study this function thoroughly, then if the conflict between them and the mechanical civilization broke out completely in the future, the human camp would surely suffer heavy deaths and injuries. Half a day later, Brahma's troops arrived at Samaran City. This was a large city 1,200 kilometers away from Karan City, and now it had been heavily guarded, and the entire Fremons, the majority of the elite had gathered here. It couldn't be helped that Fremon's population was only about 1/10 of Huashu Kingdom. After the end of the world, after all the calamities, there were less than 10 million survivors. And they happened to occupy the world's largest land area, which led to them having to concentrate their population in a handful of large cities. Because of this, when the end of the invasion of the mechanical civilization appeared, they were unable to send out a large number of troops to solve it. After all, most of the Pantheon's strongest men had to stay behind to defend Fremon's axis of operation. The mutants were the protagonists of this era. But those who maintained the functioning of the huge organization were more of those weak ability users, or those without ability users. For example, most of the commanders of the various regions of Huashu Kingdom were incapable users. Even in Tianhai City, the person who commanded everything was not Zhang Yi, but Yang Xinxin, who had strong operational abilities. The strong people above the water surface were just appearances. In areas where large numbers of people gathered, the person in control below the surface was also particularly important. When the Brahma's mutants arrived, they were greeted by some of Fremon's top officials, with god of fishing and hunting, Prodaja leading the way. He was an existence similar to the likes of Deng Shintong and Li Changgong in Fremon's. He came from a distinguished background and had outstanding supernatural talents. Thus, even at a mere white chariot level, he held a high level of authority in Fremon's. Emperor Indra descended from the top of the special train, and a team of dozens of people followed behind him in great numbers. The three mutants guarding the metal crates were also relieved to see that they had successfully arrived at Samaran City. Only when Fearless Sky carried the metal box, he felt that there was something strange. It seemed that there was some deviation above the weight. However, when he thought about the fact that he had never taken his eyes off the box along the way, he thought that it might be his own illusion, and thus did not pay much attention to it. Prodaja walked over with a group of officials. The smile on his face wasn't too eager, he just politely shook Emperor Indra's hand. "Welcome, Your Excellency, for leading a team to support Fremons." "Your Excellency Emperor Indra, I have heard of your great name long ago. I have always heard that you are a very intelligent person. Prodaja wore a smile, but in his heart, he said, "Cunning fellow." Emperor Indra noticed that the other party's attitude was a bit strange. Obviously he had brought people to help and left them with such a large amount of loot. Shouldn't they be grateful? This attitude made people very upset. Emperor Indra snorted coldly in his heart, "These guys from Fremons, they are as arrogant as ever. But everyone is a person of status, it's impossible to tear their faces off at a time like this." So Emperor Indra still said, "As a member of the human family, we, Brahma, are the world's powerhouse, so of course we have to take on the responsibility of being a powerhouse. Don't worry about it, you can rest easy once we arrive here." There was also a hint of dark sarcasm in Emperor Indra's words. "We're here to help you with what you Fremons can't set right by yourselves. What kind of big tale are you playing with me? Times are different nowadays, begging should lower your stance." The two of them shook hands, both with meaningful smiles on their faces, and in their hearts they were both very unhappy. Prodaja's gaze crossed over to Emperor Indra and looked at the crowd behind him, as well as the huge snow train. Suddenly, he saw the heavy metal box behind Fearless Sky. Prodaja said, "I didn't expect that your excellency would be able to find the bearings of where those mechanical life forms were just after arriving in Fremons. It looks like the harvest was quite fruitful." The corner of Emperor Indra's mouth lifted into a proud smile. "A mere mechanical life form is nothing more than some toys to us. It can easily be dealt with. Don't think that only the mutants of Washu Kingdom are capable. Compared to my Brahma's mutants, they are nothing more than that." Emperor Indra had been harboring a fire in his heart ever since that time when he faced Zhang Yi and avoided a battle, wanting to get it back. Prodaja gave him a deep look. "So many mechanical life forms, you should have space ability mutants to stow away, right?" Emperor Indra thought of the thousands of mechanical life forms in Batu's martial arts field, and just smiled lightly. "Of course." Prodaja thought to himself, "Sure enough. You're counting on me." He held his anger in his heart and looked at Emperor Indra with an increasingly cold gaze. "It's not even if you've finished cleaning everything yourself, you're still deliberately teasing me. Good. Now that we have a request from you, this matter will be skipped for now. But I, Prodaja, am writing this down. Sooner or later, there will be a day when you'll be begging us Fremons for help." Prodaja thought in his heart, and saw Fearless Sky's trio guarding that metal box tightly, and with just a little thought, he guessed what was in it. Their Fremon scientific research organization was already expediting to decipher the construction of the mechanical life form, and understood that the source was the most important thing. And right now, Brahma's people had just acquired it, not knowing its true value yet. Between the fights of Prodaja's mind, the smile on his face became much more sincere. "My friends, you have traveled far and hard. We must have a good drink today. Come, we have prepared a sumptuous feast. Today we will not get drunk." Prodaja said and intimately greeted Brahma's crowd as they went forward to the feast. Seeing his improved attitude, Emperor Indra nodded, thinking that this was what the other party should do, and followed them with his team. The banquet was indeed exceptionally well prepared. The table was filled with all kinds of seasonal vegetables and fresh meat, and even fresh fish. Cuisines that ordinary people wouldn't even dare to dream of nowadays were nothing more than a home-cooked meal to the top brass of Fremons. After all, even in the midst of the difficult end times, it was only the vast majority of ordinary people who were truly living in hypnosis. Prodaja had even invited a few strong men from the pantheon to come in order to show how much he valued Emperor Indra and the others. Emperor Indra scanned through them and didn't recognize any of them. He couldn't help but ask, "I've heard that the most powerful Fremon's foreigner is that Frost Queen, Winter Goddess, Mutana. Why hasn't she come over?" Emperor Indra was somewhat dissatisfied. In his opinion, as the strongest person of the world's top power, it was only appropriate for him to come over in a big way, so it was only appropriate for the strongest being of Fremons to receive him personally. Prodaja smiled as he filled a glass of vodka for Emperor Indra and explained, "I'm sorry, Ms. Morana doesn't like to interact with people on a regular basis. Even me, I can't even see her face if it's not particularly important." Only then did Emperor Indra nod. Strong people are qualified to do things according to their preferences. Because he was such a strong man. Pushing the glass, Emperor Indra also drank some vodka, his face slightly scarlet. This kind of strong alcohol, usually drunk in the far north region to protect from the cold, had a very high alcohol content, and ordinary people were not used to drinking it. Emperor Indra didn't want to drink more, but he couldn't resist the enthusiasm of Prodaja and the other mutants of Fremons. But he still maintained his sobriety. Mutants were not allowed to drink too much alcohol because they would become very weak when drunk. At this point, Epsilon wasn't much different from ordinary people. During the seat, both sides also talked about some issues regarding the current state of Fremons. After 3 rounds of drinking, the conversation opened up. Prodaja could speak well and coaxed Emperor Indra into a very comfortable position. He had been a prophet prodigy touted by everyone since he was young, and he was very receptive to the kind words of others, not to mention the fact that the other party was a high-ranking member of Fremons. So he then felt that Prodaja was a know-it-all and knew how powerful he, Emperor Indra, was. As for Gao Changkong and Azura, they were also at the banquet, but the two of them spoke less. Azura was not talkative, while Gao Changkong had been minimizing his presence due to his status. When the wine was almost gone, Prodaja sat next to Emperor Indra, his collar undone and his face red with the appearance of having drunk too much. He leaned close to Emperor Indra and said, "Those iron pimples are very difficult to deal with. We suffered a great loss from them before. I didn't expect Your Excellency Emperor Indra to be so powerful that he wiped out a mechanical army just after arriving. Such strength is admirable." Emperor Indra smiled faintly, trying to maintain his composure and elegance, but his eyes were already a bit fluttering. Nowhere, it's just clearing up some trouble along the way." Gao Changkong and Azura didn't tear him down. In reality, only they knew clearly how tragic that battle was at that time. Prodaja sighed, "It's just a pity that what you've encountered now are just scattered mechanical units. The truly large core-level mechanical units, you have yet to encounter. When you encounter them then, they will be difficult to deal with." When these words came out, Gao Changkong immediately looked over, and Azura's gaze was also grave. There were harder ones to deal with? Just a single mechanical army had already caused them to lose close to half of their battle losses. Prodaja said leisurely, "You guys have seen those mechanical life forms that don't even fear death, right? There's also that kind of super-large mechanical life form that is like a tall building. It's the most troublesome. And there were a dozen of those kinds of existences among the large mechanical legions we encountered before. As for the ordinary model mechanical life forms, they are like ants emerging from the ground, too many to count. If it wasn't for that, how could Karen City have been abandoned by us?" The images of Karen City's fall had not been seen by the people of the other kingdoms, but when Prodaja said so, they could guess a few points. Just the dozen or so oversized mechanical life forms alone made their scalps tingle a bit as they listened. Gao Changkong and Azura weighed their own strengths. Against one unit, they would also have a harder time fighting. What if it was 2 units? Then it would be hard to say. If it was a dozen units, even Emperor Indra was afraid that he would only be able to choose to flee. The two were in a somewhat heavy mood, and Emperor Indra also realized that the situation was more troublesome than expected. He lowered his eyes and then said, "It's surprising that it would be so troublesome?" Prodaja nodded. But he then said, "But we're already trying to figure out how to crack their technology. In fact, to put it bluntly, the trickiest thing about dealing with them is that they have defensive force fields that can counter supernatural powers. That alone can cut 30% of the combat power of our mutant forces." Emperor Indra asked, "So, have you made any progress in your research?" Fremons had the earliest contact with them and should have made a breakthrough long ago. Prodaja looked at Emperor Indra and slowly said, "There isn't enough material for research." Emperor Indra looked puzzled. Prodaja stared at Emperor Indra and said with a sincere face, that kind of technology is hidden within the mechanical life form's source of energy. It's a special kind of energy force field, and the technological level of mechanical civilizations surpasses ours by at least a few hundred years. And just their means of manufacturing the source alone makes us near to despair. However, if we are able to crack this technology and find out where their weaknesses lie, we will then grasp the initiative on the battlefield. Mechanical life forms without their defense force fields are nothing more than some battle tanks and vehicles. A strong person like Your Excellency can destroy them with a wave of his hand. Emperor Indra subconsciously nodded as he thought of the site of that previous battle. Prodaja was right, their toughest problem was that the mutants' abilities would be cancelled out by the defensive force field. He somewhat heard the meaning of Prodaja's words. Mr. Prodaja, I couldn't agree with you more. But what exactly do you want us to do?